not.
Okay. Did Chris ever tell you about any of those things that he also saw in her that her family was talking about?
He did not.
Okay.
And again, I didn't press because I didn't want to dig into his personal life.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously you liked Chris because you were friends with him for 25 years, but what can you tell me about him?
Chris, he has always been a quiet guy. He only opens up to the people that he's comfortable with. He's the type of guy that would do anything for you. He'd bend over backwards for you, and he's been there for me multiple times when I went through issues with relationships or whatever. Like Chris he's been a brother to me, big time, and I still love him as a brother. Like, this all comes as a shock, but still, like, Chris is a good guy, and the way the media is painting him out to be this, that's not Chris at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And he loved his daughters very, very much.
If you believe every victim deserves to be remembered and every truth deserves to be told, subscribe to The Crime Narrator. These stories live on because you're here to hear them.
For years, Chris Watts was seen as quiet, dependable, and painfully ordinary. To neighbors, coworkers, and even close friends, he was the kind of man who blended into the background, polite, soft-spoken, and seemingly harmless. But according to the CBI, the person who knew him best would later reveal a truth far more unsettling. The monster didn't appear overnight. He was hiding in plain sight. Chris Watts' best friend, a man who spent countless hours with him at work and outside of it, told investigators that Chris never raised red flags. He didn't talk about violence. He didn't express hatred toward his family. If anything, he complained the way many people do, about stress, finances, and feeling trapped in a life he didn't know how to escape. Nothing that screamed danger. Nothing that warned of what was coming. When CBI agents interviewed the friend after the murders, they pressed him hard. Had Chris ever joked about killing? Ever hinted at wanting his family gone? Ever shown signs of rage? The answer, over and over again, was no. And that was what disturbed investigators the most. According to the friend, Chris Watts had an uncanny ability to mirror whatever environment he was in. Around coworkers, he was agreeable and reliable. Around friends, he was laid back and calm. He avoided confrontation, kept his emotions tightly controlled, and rarely opened up about what he truly felt. In hindsight, investigators would describe this as emotional mimicry, one of the traits often associated with psychopathic personalities. The friend admitted something chilling. Chris never talked about love, guilt, or fear in a deep way. His emotions always stayed on the surface. At the time, it seemed like shyness. After the murders, it felt like emptiness. This was the first crack in the image of the perfect dad. And as the CBI continued digging into what Chris' closest friend revealed, it became clear that knowing someone for years doesn't mean knowing who they truly are. If this chapter made you think, please like, share, and subscribe. In the days immediately following Shanann Watts' disappearance, Chris Watts' best friend stood by him, at least at first. Like everyone else, he believed the story Chris was telling, that Shanann had taken the kids and left, that Chris was a worried husband desperate for answers. But as the CBI later revealed, there was a moment when doubt quietly crept in, and it never left. The friend told investigators that Chris' behavior during those first hours felt off. Not panicked, not frantic, just flat. While most parents would be calling non-stop, breaking down, or demanding updates, Chris remained eerily calm. He spoke in measured sentences, showed little emotional urgency, and seemed more concerned with logistics than fear. When CBI agents asked the friend what stood out the most, he didn't mention words. He mentioned tone. Chris didn't sound like a man whose entire world had collapsed. He sounded inconvenienced, detached, as if he were playing a role he'd rehearsed but never truly felt. The friend recalled riding with Chris shortly after the disappearance, listening as he spoke about Shanann in the past tense, something that struck him as strange but easy to dismiss in the moment. Stress, shock, exhaustion. That's what he told himself. That's what everyone wanted to believe. But then came the news footage. Chris standing on his front porch pleading for his family's return. The friend told CBI that watching it made his stomach turn. The performance felt hollow. The words didn't match the body language. It was as if Chris were describing someone else's tragedy, not his own.
The nation. So she's supposed to get home at like 11. She got home at like 1:48. She got in bed about 2.
What was she going for? Like family trip or what?
It was a Thrive direct sales. It was a local event that was down there between a bunch of leaders in the company.
And that day she was back. I mean,
I left work early that morning, like 5:15, 5:30. So like she barely got into bed pretty much.
And you know, this might be a tough question, but did you guys get into an argument before she left?
It wasn't like an argument. We had an emotional conversation, but I'll leave it at that. But I just want them back. I just want them to come back. And if they're not safe right now, that's what's tearing me apart. Because if they are safe, they're coming back. But if they're not, this has got to stop. Like somebody has to come forward.
Have you spoken to her family, like her parents?
Yeah, they've been in constant contact, like every hour. I mean, everybody back in North Carolina.
That was when the friend stopped defending him internally. He didn't accuse him, not yet, but the image of Chris as a harmless, passive man began to crack. The CBI later noted that this emotional incongruence, where outward behavior doesn't match the situation, is a classic red flag in psychopathy. And Chris Watts' closest friend had witnessed it firsthand, long before the truth fully surfaced.
She was afraid she had just lost Chris, that, Shanann was going to, turn Chris against her, like what has happened in the past. And
Okay.
so she had called me crying and just letting me know, and that's when I just text Chris, like, hey, man, like, what's going on, dude? And yeah.
Okay. You said that in the past, Shanann's turned Chris against Cindy. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so right around the time when they were engaged, I believe, Chris and Shanann were engaged, this huge fight between Cindy, Jamie, and Shanann was taking place, and they all felt like Shanann was trying to turn Chris against the family, and for a little bit there, Chris was on Shanann's side, not really defending his family. But I guess over the course of a year or two, they ended up patching things up, and they finally made amends, and they had back to a talking relationship again. And then this happened, and so it was like we're basically going back to square one.
Gotcha. And so could you tell, was Chris taking Shanann's side again in the fight about the food allergy thing?
Yeah, so Cindy did say that Chris initially was on Shanann's side, like he was upset with his family. But then, out of nowhere, Cindy did text me or call me again and say that Chris...
As the investigation intensified, CBI agents focused closely on private conversations, moments when Chris Watts wasn't performing for cameras or law enforcement. It was during these quiet exchanges that his best friend began to hear things he would never forget. According to the friend's statement, Chris spoke about Shanann and the children in a disturbingly detached way. There was no desperation in his voice, no urgency. Instead, his words were oddly practical, even self-centered. He talked about how his life felt lighter, how the house was quiet, and how everything felt different, not broken, but changed. At one point, Chris allegedly said something that sent chills through the room. "I just want this to be over. Not I want them back. Not I'm scared. Just over." The friend told CBI that this was the moment he felt something inside him drop. Those weren't the words of a grieving husband. They sounded like the thoughts of someone eager for an ending, any ending, that benefited him. Even more unsettling was how Chris discussed the future. He mentioned work schedules, finances, and moving forward, all while his family was still missing. The friend described it as emotional time travel. Chris was already mentally living in a world where Shanann and the kids no longer existed. CBI investigators later pointed out that this kind of language is often seen in individuals who emotionally detach from their actions before committing them. It's a psychological distancing, a way to erase guilt by rewriting reality. The friend admitted that guilt would haunt him forever. He wondered if he should have spoken up sooner, questioned harder, pushed back. But at the time, disbelief was easier than the truth. Because accepting what Chris was saying meant accepting something far worse, that the man he trusted wasn't grieving, he was relieved. As Chris Watts' statements continued to unravel, the CBI began layering psychological analysis over the mounting evidence. What his best friend had described, emotional detachment, rehearsed responses, and future-focused thinking, was no longer viewed as coincidence. It was pattern. According to CBI records, investigators recognized traits commonly associated with covert psychopathy. Unlike the violent, explosive stereotype, this type of individual presents as calm, compliant, and non-threatening. They blend in, they avoid conflict, and they mimic normal emotional responses without truly experiencing them. Chris Watts fit that profile disturbingly well. The best friend told investigators that Chris rarely showed genuine emotion even before the murders. He didn't celebrate deeply. He didn't grieve openly. His reactions always felt muted, controlled, almost programmed. At the time, it read as introversion. After the arrests, it read as something far more dangerous. CBI analysts noted how Chris adapted his personality, depending on who he was with. Around supervisors, he was responsible and eager to please. Around friends, he was easygoing. Around his family, he appeared passive. This ability to shift without friction is often referred to as emotional camouflage, a trait linked to psychopathic masking. What stood out most was the lack of internal conflict. Even as pressure mounted, Chris didn't display anxiety consistent with innocent fear. Instead, he showed irritation when his plans were interrupted. Investigators described him as a man frustrated by inconvenience, not devastated by loss.
Gonna make up some Thrive Bites for us.
And I'm gonna go wash my hands real fast.
Uh-oh. It's just gonna be me here alone. Oh, we got some people joining. Bella, look. Got people looking at us. Say hi. Wife's gonna be making up some Thrive Bites here in a second, so make sure you hop on and join us for the 12 days of Christmas. Bella's got some chocolate chips.
I need a Lavelle apron. Alright guys. Hey Michelle. Hey Amanda. Bella's showing you what she's eating. She's eating the ingredients. She's been eating the ingredients since I've been getting them prepared, so. So we're gonna make Thrive Bites today. Chris didn't want to go on live doing it because he didn't want to mess anything up. Not that you can mess anything up with Thrive Bites. It's so simple. Except for today, we're gonna double the recipe because we love the Thrive Bites. When you are craving something to eat, or junk food or whatever, you just pop a Thrive Bite and it fills you up, and it's really delicious. Thrive Bites, right?
Good job, Bella.
My little helper right here.
Thrive Bites.
So today, I will post in the feed the Thrive Bites. Bella, shh. Will you turn it down for me, please? So I'm going to post in the thread here today on how to make Thrive Bites and the recipe. So basically it calls for 1 packet of your lifestyle mix. Now you can use any flavor. I'm going to use vanilla here today. And hold on, honey. It calls for a cup of oats, a half a cup of peanut butter. Hi, Bonnie. Hey, Corey. Look at Bella. A half a cup of mini morsels. Now,
when CBI confronted the best friend with this profile, the realization hit hard. Every strange moment, every hollow conversation, every uneasy silence suddenly made sense.
Back to a talking relationship again, and
Okay.
then this happened, and so it was like we were basically going back to square one.
Gotcha. And so could you tell, was Chris taking Shanann's side again in the fight about the food allergy thing?
Yeah, so Cindy did say that Chris initially was on Shanann's side, like he was upset with his family. But then, out of nowhere, Cindy did text me or call me again and say that Chris has decided to separate from Shanann.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, like, it was Chris, he was even telling me during the text messages that he had seen the true side of Shanann and that he is done. He doesn't want to be with her anymore. And so we're like, okay. And that's so I was like, hey, man, I'm here if you want to talk. You know, I understand this is going to be a big process, so just let me know, man. And he said he would, but he never reached out.
Okay. Do you know what he meant by that when he said he saw the true side of Shanann?
I didn't ask because I didn't feel like it was my position to dig, but I had assumed that he had seen, because for years his family has always assumed that Shanann has been pretty shady. And I never really saw it, but they all had reason to believe that she was very, very, there was something about her. And Chris said he had finally seen whatever his family had.
The friend later said the most terrifying part wasn't that Chris lied, it was how effortlessly he did it. Without cracks, without guilt, without hesitation. This wasn't someone who snapped. This was someone who calculated. And as the psychological profile sharpened, investigators understood something chilling. The friend hadn't been standing next to a broken man. He had been standing next to someone capable of unimaginable violence while appearing completely normal. The final interaction between Chris Watts and his best friend would replay in his mind for years. According to CBI disclosures, it wasn't dramatic. There was no explosion of emotion, no confession, no visible breakdown. That's what made it unforgettable. By this point, the investigation was tightening. Search warrants had been executed. Evidence was surfacing. And the air around Chris felt heavy, charged with something unspoken. The friend said Chris seemed aware that the walls were closing in, yet he remained eerily composed. During their last conversation, Chris spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. He didn't ask for reassurance. He didn't ask for help. Instead, he made vague statements about accepting whatever happens and wanting peace. To the friend, it sounded less like fear and more like resignation, someone preparing for an outcome he already knew was coming. Then came the moment that shattered all remaining denial. Chris looked at him and said, "No matter what they say, just remember I wasn't always a bad person." The friend later told CBI that those words hit him like ice. Innocent people don't frame themselves that way. They don't ask to be remembered kindly before the truth is known. It felt like a quiet admission without details, a plea for legacy rather than innocence. There were no tears, no visible remorse, just calm acceptance. After that conversation, the friend distanced himself completely. When news broke of Chris' confession and arrest, shock gave way to something darker, recognition. Every strange behavior, every hollow word, every emotional void suddenly aligned. CBI investigators noted that this interaction reflected a core psychopathic trait, self-focus, even at the edge of exposure. Chris wasn't concerned about Shanann or the children. He was concerned about how he would be seen. For the friend, the guilt lingered, but so did clarity. He finally understood the truth no one wants to face. Sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the loudest, angriest, or most unstable. Sometimes they're the ones who never show you who they are at all. As the case against Chris Watts reached its final stages, CBI investigators revisited every interview, every recorded conversation, and every offhand remark. That's when they realized something crucial. Chris' best friend hadn't just been a witness to strange behavior. He had unknowingly documented the psychology of a killer. CBI analysts later stated that the friend's testimony helped confirm what physical evidence alone could not explain: why Chris Watts was able to commit such an unthinkable crime without visible emotional collapse. The calmness, the detachment, the absence of panic. These weren't reactions after the crime. They were traits that existed long before it. Investigators noted how the friend consistently described Chris as emotionally shallow, conflict avoidant, and eerily adaptable.
Do you know what it was that the family was seeing in her?
She was just. This is what they were telling me, is that she was very shady. She had a dark past, like I don't know, like sleeping with her old boss, and even while she was seeing Chris, and money issues with her boss. She was just very conniving, and that was what they were telling me. Now, when I saw Shanann, I didn't see any of that. Like, she was always very pleasant.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you never had any issues with Shanann?
No, I mean, I never saw that side. I didn't really trust her just because of a lot of things that were being said.
Right.
Yeah, but I never actually physically saw anything.
Okay. Sorry, my pen just died. I had to find another one. So he never really gave specifics about what he saw or the reason he was wanting to separate?
He did not. I was basically letting him know about the conversation that I had with his mother, just cluing him in on what his mom was saying about Shanann, and he was not really confirming it, but confirming it that, yeah, I've seen that part of Shanann, but he never said exactly what he saw. He just said, I've seen that side of her, I've seen the true side of her, and I'm done.
Okay.
I was like, okay.
He never exploded in anger. He never confided deep fears. He simply adjusted, mirroring expectations and blending into whatever role was required. To CBI profilers, this reinforced the conclusion that Chris Watts wasn't overwhelmed by emotion. He was guided by control. What haunted the friend most was realizing that the warning signs weren't dramatic. There were no threats, no violent outbursts, just silence where emotion should have been. And silence, CBI noted, can be the most dangerous signal of all. The friend later said the hardest truth to accept was that Chris had trusted him, not enough to confess, but enough to reveal himself unintentionally. The statements about relief, the focus on the future, the concern over reputation, all of it formed a psychological trail investigators could follow straight to the truth. In the end, the friend wasn't blamed, but he was forever changed. He learned that evil doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it looks like a quiet man at work, a reliable coworker, a trusted friend. And that realization, according to CBI, may be the most chilling lesson of all. If this chapter made you think, please like, share, and subscribe. The Chris Watts case didn't just shock the public. It forced investigators, psychologists, and everyday people to rethink what danger really looks like. According to the CBI, one of the most unsettling aspects wasn't the crime itself, but how normal Chris Watts appeared right up until the end. And it was the testimony of his best friend that helped redefine that illusion. CBI investigators later emphasized that many people expect violence to come with warning signs, explosive anger, erratic behavior, or visible instability. Chris displayed none of that. Instead, he embodied reliability, routine, calm. His best friend described him as predictable, consistent, and non-threatening, qualities that in hindsight made him easier to trust and harder to suspect. The case highlighted how emotional absence can be just as revealing as emotional chaos. Chris didn't react the way most people do because he didn't process events the way most people do. CBI profilers noted that his ability to remain composed wasn't strength, it was detachment, a lack of emotional depth that allowed him to commit violence without the internal resistance that stops most people. For the public, this realization was deeply uncomfortable. If someone like Chris Watts could commit such a crime, what does that say about how we judge character? How many warning signs are dismissed because they don't fit the stereotype? The friend's reflections became a powerful cautionary tale. He admitted that he equated quiet with safe and agreeable with harmless. The CBI later stated that this assumption is one of the most common and dangerous misconceptions in behavioral analysis. The Watts case reshaped training discussions and public awareness alike. It taught a hard truth: evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it smiles, and sometimes it looks exactly like someone you trust. Long after the interviews ended and the case was closed, Chris Watts' best friend was left alone with the memories. According to statements referenced by the CBI, the guilt didn't come from what he knew, but from what he didn't question. He replayed conversations in his mind, searching for moments where he could have pushed harder or listened differently. The calm tone, the strange choice of words, the emotional emptiness, none of it seemed dangerous at the time. Now every detail felt like a warning he failed to recognize. The friend admitted that the hardest part wasn't betrayal, it was realization. Realizing that someone could share jokes with you, work beside you, and earn your trust, all while hiding something so dark. He told investigators that he no longer views people the same way. Silence now feels louder. Calm feels heavier. CBI psychologists later noted that this kind of aftermath is common for those close to psychopathic offenders. The trauma isn't just about association, it's about self-doubt, questioning your instincts, wondering how evil passed so close without detection. What haunted the friend most was the understanding that Chris never truly needed him emotionally. The friendship, like everything else in Chris' life, served a function. It provided normalcy, cover, a mirror of humanity that helped him blend in. In the end, the friend accepted a painful truth: monsters don't always isolate themselves. Sometimes they build lives, routines, and relationships that protect them until they no longer need them. The CBI concluded that while justice was served, the damage extended far beyond the victims and their families. It rippled outward, altering the lives of everyone who once trusted Chris Watts. And for his best friend, that damage remains permanent, a reminder that the most frightening evil is the kind you never see coming. If this series left an impact, please like, share, and subscribe. Supporting the channel helps keep these stories focused on truth, awareness, and the lessons we must not ignore.